moderator that can tell you a little bit more about how the setting will go. But in the meantime, I would like to remind all of you, please use the notepad to write your question, your name, and your email. Just in case if you don't get the time to get to it, you will forward it to the senator's office, and I know they'll get back to you, and they've done it before. But the person that I'm about to introduce as the moderator of this afternoon, not only is a community leader, but he's a mentor of mine. He's somebody that's been in the community for many years, and when you hear his story, he got here for one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. He never made a difference either. He's from Ethiopia, Eritrea, Senegal. He's here to serve the community. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, he always has extended a hand to all of us. And I know he didn't extend his hand to me when I just got here, barely could speak English properly. And he's behind the scene. And as African in our culture, we always know to give respect to the elders. We might call it elders, but in his mind and brain, he's still young, still fighting with us and getting us really busy and represent the community the proper way we do. Without further ado, please help me welcome Deacon Yusuf. Thank you.
Thank you for that great introduction. Honestly, I have never been introduced that way, and I'll cherish it for a long time to come. Thank you, Papa. I want to also extend my admiration and gratitude for the cause that you have espoused, Papa. The dreams that you carried for the first time I met you, I believe it was maybe 12, 13 years ago. And you have turned out to be true to your dreams. You are doing the most incredible thing for the African community. That includes me, my nation, and we are indebted to you. Thank you. Hi, my name is Yusuf Tafari, Deacon Yusuf Tafari. I'm from Ethiopia, and I'm an African. I just happen to be here living in Colorado for the last 44 years or so. I am still a citizen of Ethiopia. I'm a permanent resident of the United States. So you know, I am also legally a refugee of the United Nations. Probably one of the longest running refugees alive. But enough about me. This is truly a remarkable day for all of us, for all Africans, because we are breaking today a new ground. Papa did give in that very insightful introduction that we come from nearly 50 states from Africa, each one of us. But we are all immigrants in the great state of the United States. And so we are one in our interest. But rarely have we thought of creating a forum like this, that our interest is collectively represented. And that we need from our leaders, from our political leaders, to hear what our concerns are, what our interests are, how we vote, and for us to be so civically engaged so that truly the forum will allow us to get the information that is needed. We don't need to vote, but we need to vote with the right information. And for that to do that is this process, which is basically the essence of civic engagement. And today we make history in the United States. And I'm grateful to you, to your participation for this.
Very well. That United States flag with red, white, and blue isn't about your political affiliation. It's not about the country that you are from. It is all of us together, all of our countries together, represented in the colors of that flag. You know, Deacon, my family came to the United States as almost all of us did from somewhere else. My wife, who's here with me today, please welcome Jamie. Is here today. My wife and I have 3 beautiful children, and I come from a farming family, a farm background, a small community in eastern Colorado, and we sell tractors. That's the family business. And my great-great-grandfather came to that community in 1910. And there is a piece of concrete that still exists downtown on Main Street in that little community. And it says J.A.S. and Son 1910. It stands for James Gardner and Son 1910. It was the site of his very first hardware store that's still in our family today. But what you all have said today reminds me of something that's very important. When we go for walks in that community at night, and we go and we see that piece of concrete with my great-great-grandfather's name, our children's great-great-great-grandfather, we wonder, will they have the same chance, the same opportunity, the same power of this country to lead the life that they want to create the families and build the families that they want to? Everybody here is here because we saw and see in America something great, something special, something spectacular. And I'm blessed that my family was here in 1910. But I often think if Jamie and I were anywhere else around the world, if we were anywhere else around the world today, what would we be doing to get here now? To be here, to fight to get here, to struggle to get here, to be a part of the opportunity that is this country, that you are here, and we are a better, stronger nation because every one of you are here. And I just can't thank you enough for that commitment. The power of your presence in this country is what gives this nation our power and our greatness. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this historic opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. So we have prepared a few questions that would be a segue for our discussion that would help us, at least for you to understand the core interests of our community. And in many ways, we feel very strongly that in the present day, the political climate, sometimes we get dwarfed in the sea of the noise, so to speak, and we are not seen, at least visibly, in the radar, in the political radar, and we get overlooked. So one of the major issues, obviously, as immigrants, we recognize the United States is a land of immigrants. And immigration is a major topic in the minds of many people, including us. So if you could express your feeling about the question of immigration reform, and what the plans, how you see that the country will navigate this issue that is so dear and close to us.
Well, thank you, Deacon Joseph. My family is here because of immigration. As we talked about in the opening comments, all of us are here, most of us in the country are here because of the ability to be in this great nation, to be a part of this great nation. And we need an immigration system that continues to be open to people around the world who share that same common hope for a better life, for freedom, to be a part of a nation that is special because we are a nation of nations, the United States of America. And so what we have to expect from our immigration system is, yes, we will have a system that is rule of laws. We will have security. But we will also have a system that works. When I speak to somebody who has just become a citizen, as I often do, and it took them 17 years to become a citizen, we can do better than that. We need to create a system that is more efficient, that is faster, that recognizes the ability of people to be a part of this country and get their citizenship without having 17 or 18 or 19 or 20 years go by, because that becomes then a disincentive to follow the law. So let's make it a system that we can all be proud of. Let's make sure that we have an entry-exit system in this country that works. We have a system right now where 42% of the people in the country without documentation are here because they have an expired visa. Well, we can do better. We can understand it. We can fix that. That's an easy thing for us to do. We need to pass the DREAM Act. I'm a sponsor of the DREAM Act, which says that for people who are brought here through no fault of their own at a young age, we need to fix that, allow them to become citizens. We don't charge somebody for walking. We don't charge a 5-year-old child with trespassing for walking across our front lawn. We need to make sure that we fix this and pass legislation. This common sense. Senator Bennett and I, my colleague here in Colorado, introduced a bill that addressed all of those issues, most of those issues. That addressed security, it addressed the family migration issues, it addressed some of the other visa issues that we need to address. And we worked with a bipartisan group of senators. It was called the Gang of Six bill. We got a vote on it in the U.S. Senate. Unfortunately, it failed. We got Republicans and Democrats to support the bill, but we need to continue to work on it. We need an immigration system that recognizes that we ought to be attracting the best and the brightest, that we need to continue inviting people from around the world to be here because of that beacon of hope that it represents. And it shouldn't be a system that punishes people for following the law. And I think that's sometimes what can happen is we have a system that is so difficult to follow that it can be a disincentive to follow. I spoke with a gentleman who just became a citizen on January 4th of this year, and his 2 daughters were with him. And when he told me his story, he was from Windsor, Colorado. When he told me his story that he had become a citizen on January 4th, you couldn't just see the pride in his eyes, but in his 8-year-old daughter and his 10-year-old daughter's eyes. And they were looking up to him, and they were so proud, and we have all experienced that moment when we realize we're a part of something great, and that's what we have to continue to do. So immigration ought to be something this nation is proud of. Fix it. We're smart people. And that's why I think the African community can be a part of this solution to help us with the ideas of what's working and what's not working, to get the community engaged and involved so that we can get the process of policies right and make sure that we're representative of a system that doesn't just represent a solution for some of the world, but all of the world.
Thank you very much. While we're still at the immigration issue, foreign policy of the country is also has a direct, it's a consequential policy that affects widely for those people who have the chance to be able to immigrate to the United States. All of it is connected together to the foreign policy. And one of the things that we realized as the Trump administration putting a freeze on the diversity program, that had impacted us disproportionately because it's one of the few opportunities that we have as African immigrants. Diversity program truly has opened that for us. I know this is the administration. It's not empowered by anything Congress is doing. But the other aspect of foreign policy that seemed to affect us, again, with the present administration, many of attempts to deal with particularly African countries, the policies are actually being given away from the State Department and given to other, I don't know how the term is, the protocol itself, and that there isn't enough sufficient knowledge by those departments to handle foreign affairs. And I was just going to ask you your thoughts about that.
Well, thank you, Deacon. And so I serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I'm the chairman, actually, of the Asia subcommittee on foreign relations. But we've had many hearings on Africa-U.S. relationships with Africa. And one of the experiences I had with, as chairman of the Asia subcommittee, was a leader in the Philippines once said to me, we don't know who the United States is anymore. We don't know who you are. Because and what he meant by this was he said, we used to know Senator Bob Dole, and we used to know Senator Daniel Inouye, and we used to know some of the older members of the Senate. By older, I just mean that they had been there long enough that they had built relationships in Asia. And if you look at Africa, the United States has to do a better job of building relationships in and with Africa at the State Department, in the United States Senate, within the administration, and its relationships between the various nations and provinces and states and assemblies and government systems throughout, so that you can have that cultural exchange of ideas and people and relationships. Because it's my experience that it's hard to hate up close. It is hard to hate up close. And when you bring people together, a funny thing happens. You get to know each other. You get to respect each other. You get to learn about what each other cares about. And while you may disagree on an idea or something, you actually will understand why that person thinks the way they do. And they get to understand why you think the way you do, and why I think the way I do. And when we do that, we can find that common ground of ideas. So I've expressed my opposition to the administration over many parts of their immigration policies, I think, are wrong, including the diversity programs that hurt the relationship with the State Department and our immigration policy. And we have to continue to do a better job. But we need to make sure that we are not standing isolated, that we are not looking inward, we're looking outward and building those relationships, pushing the State Department to develop, continuing the economic engagement with the United States and African nations as we continue to build trade opportunities, as we continue to build national security operations. Great power competition isn't playing out simply between the United States and China. It's playing out between the United States and China and Africa and every country around the world, and we have to be engaged in this.
Thank you for saying that. And obviously, the engagement in many fronts, including trade and closer relationship in so many matters, including security interests. When the United States pulled back, that vacancy does not remain vacant. And we've really seen China's inroad in Africa. So far, what we see is there is not a true path of what we United States need to do to combat it. To say we complain the fact that China is having an inroad and having an influence in Africa. So, yeah.
It's important because I think about our children, and we've all had this experience with our children when they want to get your attention. They're trying to talk to you, get your attention, and we need to make sure that our children are paying attention to the way we behave, and that is by us paying respect to everyone, sharing that respect around the globe. And that's why our actions with the State Department matter. That's why our actions with trade matter, and making sure that we don't allow somebody else to fill the vacuum when the United States isn't leading. The resolution that we have talked about in the past, that's about U.S. leadership and engagement and recognition of what we can be doing to stand up in Ethiopia and in the region, and making sure that we are promoting economic opportunity and promoting freedoms and promoting human rights. It's important that we have that relationship to be able to do that.
So now we're in the topic of resolution, at least from the House side. A couple of weeks ago, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Subcommittee for Africa, run by Representative Karen Bass, they had a hearing, and it is about the sliding back of democracy in the continent of Africa. That was a topic. I don't know, since some of you participated, I hope you have, but it was a very eye-opening discussion. They had three experts who spoke about, in particular, the sub-Saharan African countries in West Africa, which was modeled about 10 years ago as a beacon of democracy, and now it's slide back. It touches all the region. It touches Ethiopia and other countries also. Just yesterday, that subcommittee introduced in regard to Ethiopia a new resolution. I don't know if you have an opportunity or how you feel about something like this that affects particular countries, but Africa in general. Maybe your thoughts about similar measures that can be taken with the Senate.
Yeah, absolutely. I have read and reviewed the resolution that Congresswoman Bass has put forward, and I support the resolution. I think it's a very good resolution. The concepts and the ideas within it, recognizing both sides of opportunity and challenge, right? That every opportunity has its own challenge. That every advance can have a challenging trail. And so, how do we make sure that we recognize and reward the progress that has been made, the promise that is there, but also recognizing the challenge? And I think that's what Congresswoman Bass's resolution does. And I certainly would look forward to fighting for that resolution in the Senate. And I think it's recognition. We talked about the engagement of the United States and leadership in partnership with Africa. I think this is a good step.
Thank you. And so, just before I leave this subject, and maybe comes in the question later, we truly appreciated Representative Mike Kaufman's leadership in the resolution HR 128 that really brought about a subsequent change and the regime change and reform process to begin in Ethiopia. And it has consequences. The United States, you carry a big stick and carrot, but to do it in the right way will have big impact, for Africa.
That's right, and I remember talking with Congressman Kaufman at the time about that, and working with Senator Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma about and fighting on behalf of and for Mike Kaufman's resolution to make sure that we were able to move Mike Kaufman's resolution. But I went to Senator Inhofe to make sure that I was a champion for that Mike Kaufman resolution.
Thank you. So moving into more local issues, we of course we are indigenous immigrants from Africa, and we all have our own history, our culture, and whatnot. But there were historically African descents who have come to the United States as slaves. And so we joined that community and having an opportunity, because one of the Civil Rights Act that really propelled the issue of African immigrants, people that look like us, for the first time to enter the States, is brought about by the struggle of the civil rights and the 1964 Immigration Act that came about, is that allowed us. And speaking of that, then we of course joined the African American systemic racism, ancient social injustice, police reform, and even in the issues of the Black Lives Matter. Because us as immigrants, now we have children that are African Americans. Yes, we all can trace our history, but we gave birth to our children that their fate is highly tied to the interest of the general public. And so this is a very important issue for us, for getting an opportunity in social justice. And just wanted to see if you can address the issue surrounding this.
Well, thank you. And I think this summer in particular, we have seen images that have touched our hearts in ways that perhaps nothing has. The United States was born with the original sin of slavery. And we must always be aware of that our fight against discrimination, our fight against injustice and inequality, isn't just something of the past, but it's something that we have to fight each and every minute to make sure that we protect our rights, that we protect the equality that our law guarantees. There is no room for racism in this nation. There's no room in the world. There's no room for discrimination. There's no room for white supremacy. There is no room for people who would judge someone else because of the color of their skin and decide that they are better, that somebody else is inferior. And we have to recognize that our country started with that initial sin, and that fight continues today. And that we will never look back without acknowledging it, but also that we never look forward without a resolve to continue the fight for justice, for equality. And that's why legislation like the Justice Act that we pursued in the United States Senate that focused on police reforms, police brutality, that we would work on to make sure that we're tracking the incidents of violence, police violence, shootings across the country. We can provide training and help with communities that we know that that's real. That would provide more opportunities for minorities to have access to quality education, affordable education. That we fight to make sure that there are lenders in our communities who can, provide financing to businesses within the minority community. I'm just looking at the COVID-19 response and the Paycheck Protection Program, the work that we needed to do to make sure that unbanked, underbanked communities had access to the program through CDFI lenders and CDC lenders to make sure that we had, it's not just focused on long-established relationships, but every community, every underserved community has opportunities, and so it's no longer underserved. If I can share a story, though, because it's got a particular Colorado angle to it. If you've ever been downtown Denver and you've seen the Ralph Carr Memorial Justice Center, the state courthouse that is right across the street from the Colorado State Capitol. It's the Ralph Carr Justice Center. Ralph Carr was governor of Colorado during World War II. During World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. That executive order called for the internment of Japanese Americans. Japanese Americans were removed from their homes unconstitutionally, and our country has rightfully recognized it. But at the time, they were unconstitutionally removed from their homes and placed in internment camps around the country, including one site here in Colorado, a place called Amachi in southeastern Colorado. In 1943, a girl by the name of Mary Kenesha was the top of her graduating class at the high school that they had established at Amachi. And she was asked to give a speech because she was graduating number one in her class, and so she wrote her speech. And she started her speech out with this. She said, "As I write this speech sitting behind barbed wire and spotlights, searchlights, I ask myself what America means to me today. Because if you would have asked me a year ago what America means to me, I would have said equality, justice, freedom, and fairness. But here I am removed from my home. Do we, the graduating class of 1943, still believe that America means justice, freedom, equality, fairness?" And then she, in her speech, poses this question. She said, "It's at that time that I realized that all the questions to the present could be found in the past." And so she writes about the history of America, that we have that original sin of slavery, that we had discrimination against Native Americans, that we treated people unfairly, unconstitutionally, that we discriminated against various populations through this nation's history. But she goes on to say, though, that every time we did that, we fought even a war to try to change that, to stop that, to recognize that we did it wrong, to pass a 1964 law, to correct the wrongs of the past. And she ends her speech by saying that, so knowing all of these things, do we still believe that the United States represents those ideas of fairness, freedom, justice, and equality? And her answer was yes, with all her heart, because in America lies the hope of the world. And so while we've made mistakes, we must learn from those mistakes, and we must always recognize that we are a nation in search of a more perfect union. And that's what this moment calls for. This moment of injustice, this moment of national questioning about whether we've gotten it right as a country. But we can never give up on the hope for the country, while we always work for that better definition of our country to be lived out through the actual equality that we know our nation stands for.
Thank you. That was truly a remarkable story to hear. There's no question that the United States still remains as the beacon of hope for every human being around the world. I mentioned earlier that when I immigrated to the United States, my second country was Sudan. That's where I fled. And I remember the day, because I was the first Ethiopian immigrant or refugee from Sudan that was allowed to enter the United States. It was almost like trying to be recreated again. That opportunity, that optimism, that hope that I had. It's almost feeling that I won a new ticket for a new life, a new lease of life. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want, the world cannot afford for this beacon of hope to finally dim, because it's not only hurt us here, 330 million people, but this is truly a beacon of hope for the world that we would lose if we lose that chance. So one of the issues, obviously, the healthcare reform, and particularly at the time of COVID-19, with actually this pandemic seemed to affect people of color disproportionately. The healthcare reform is very, very dear to many, including us. So please just give us your thoughts about how you see that we're going to navigate this major issue, because there seem to be differences in the way each party looks at this issue, and because you have impressed me, Senator, as a person who allow yourself to look through this in a prism different than most politicians that I have had an opportunity. And it's a great virtue to have, by the way, Senator. So I just wanted to see your personal take about how this nation is going to navigate this issue going forward.
Well, thank you, Deacon Joseph, and a couple things. I think we all want to, number one, increase the quality of healthcare. We want better healthcare. Two, we want to decrease the cost of that healthcare to make it affordable. So if those are the two primary goals, then what do we need to do to achieve them? During this COVID-19 pandemic, I have fought with the administration to secure an extension of the public health emergency order, which will continue to allow the increased Medicaid benefits to go forward during the COVID-19 public health emergency. That was set to expire on October 23rd. We were able to get that expanded and extended so that it will not expire on October 23rd. I've also worked with the state of Colorado, Governor Polis, to make sure that when Colorado requested a waiver from the Health and Human Services Department so that we could create a reinsurance program in Colorado to drive down the cost of insurance, the governor called me and asked me if I would help secure that waiver because they weren't getting it on their own. So I called and helped Governor Polis get that waiver. So that's part of our health insurance solution too, working with Governor Polis to create a reinsurance program to help drive down the cost of health insurance here. I think regardless of what is the arguments of different ideas, we all recognize the need to make sure that people have coverage for pre-existing conditions. And there are political that we have coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. And I think a lot of people would agree that the policies that we've had don't reach the first thing and the first ideas, the principles that I laid out. What we have right now is not resulting in that higher quality of care with lower cost of care. So what it is, what can we replace that with? Well, the reassurance idea is one step. We can have that national model for that. High-risk pools, that's another model for it, where we take some of the higher cost individuals, make sure that they have affordable care, but also prevent that from increasing the cost of others. We can do that at a national system. But we need to make sure that we have and allow a competition to flourish. In Colorado, there are only 22 counties in the state of Colorado. There are 22 counties in the state of Colorado that only have one insurance option or provider to choose from. We need more competition. We need more options. We need to tear down the barriers and the burdens so that we can actually get more to choose from. We need price transparency as well. If you go to a car dealership and you want to price a new car or a used car, that dealership is going to tell you the price of that vehicle. If you go to the dealership next door to it, you ask for the same car, they're going to give you a price for that car. But if you go to the hospital and you say, how much is it going to cost to fix my broken arm? They may not be able to tell you that. They may not be able to tell you what a procedure for something costs, because we have a lack of transparency. So we need more transparency. We need to reduce the number of unnecessary procedures that are carried out in our healthcare system. It's been estimated that as much as 25% of our healthcare costs are a result of unnecessary procedures. So we need to fix that. We need to allow association health plans to occur. I mentioned that our family sells farm equipment. Well, we sell red tractors. Our neighbors sell green tractors. You probably all know the John Deere tractors. We both sell tractors. Why can't we join together in an association and have the two dealerships, the next door business and our business, under one policy? Because we basically are doing the same work. But that helps expand the pool, drives down the cost. We need to allow insurance across state lines. We need a patient-centered healthcare system. That's what I focus on. I am worried about attempts to take that away from the consumer, to take it away from the patient, and give that decision to the government, because I just don't think the government is going to be as good about our care as we ourselves and our doctors can be for ourselves. So yes, let's drive down the cost. Yes, let's increase the quality. But let's put the patients and their doctors in charge, not somebody in Washington, D.C. to make the decisions for us.
Thank you. On coming to economic reforms, particularly for small business, we immigrants, by and large, are, a service industry occupant. I mean, that's basically our bread and butter. And even if we venture in business, it surrounds around small service industry. And furthermore, we really are handicapped in terms of access to capital, our ability to mitigate a pandemic of this proportion. And so, our community is struggling. The impact is, no one is prepared for this, but it seems like in the prism of the marketplace, it seems like it disproportionately affects us. This pandemic, it affects us unproportionately in terms of health crisis. So it will also affect us unproportionately in economic fronts. So we get hit on both sides. And how do we mitigate this issue? Because I know you're really interested in making sure that we have a way to be able to build that liaison between assistance that Congress allows to really go down to the small businesses, and particularly minority-owned business, which includes us.
Right, and let me just talk to you about the health impact for a little bit, because I want to make sure that we talk about that. We have funded, and I have encouraged our health agencies and research institutions to make sure that we are understanding the impact on COVID-19 on our African community and what it it has meant to, to the coronavirus itself, the susceptibility, the risk. And so we need to make sure that we understand that. So we are working with our scientists and researchers to find out and understand that. And then I've encouraged the administration to make it clear that when that vaccine is developed and approved, that we have a rollout system that goes to the most affected, most vulnerable first. And we need to have that health understanding on our different communities to make sure that we get that part of it right, if that makes sense. I was just across the street meeting with the chief immunologist at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, who's leading one of the vaccine trials. And that's one of the most important things. I believe his name is Tom Campbell. Dr. Campbell, that's one of the most important things he said that we could be doing was to make sure that we have that rollout of the vaccine in place that so communities know how it's going to be distributed. So that's what. On the business side of things, look, our family is a small business, and I understand the struggles and the challenges. And over the last several years, we have had economic reforms that have allowed Colorado's household income on average to increase by over $1,400 per household. We've seen average household income growth in the western United States grow at 7% a year. We've seen opportunity zones that have been created right here in Aurora and around the country. If you work in an opportunity zone, your wage growth is about 8% higher than a non-opportunity zone wage earner. And so and we've actually seen family wealth, a far higher, faster percentage than white families in this country. And so that has meant that we've seen quite a bit of investments occurring, and we have to continue that. So what do we need to be doing now? Number one, I mentioned that we need to focus on getting these dollars, whether it's a coronavirus paycheck protection program response or any other long-standing program. We need to make sure those dollars are getting into unserved, underserved communities, unbanked, underbanked communities, minority communities. How do we do that? We require them to do it. Number one, we give incentives to banks to make loans to those underbanked, underserved communities. We give them an incentive to do it so that they make those loans first, they get paid back on those loans first, and then they can turn that money around and go faster. We actually pursued that idea through the Paycheck Protection Program to encourage lenders to give to the smallest of small businesses and minority-owned businesses so that that money would go out the door first to them, and then they could recycle that money. So that's one thing. We need to make sure that there's a fund here in Colorado called Closing the Gap that we need to make sure everybody knows about, because it is another resource that provides grants to businesses, small businesses. It is targeted to minority businesses, to immigrant businesses, veteran-owned businesses. So we can engage in the community, and we're pushing them to do just sources out into that community. And we need to make sure that when we have regulatory reforms and tax reforms that have been applying or able to get it, that those are lower costs. Because the more money you keep in your pocket, the more money your family has, the more opportunities you have to spend it the way you want to invest it in things that you want to, and that's better for the community. And Papa said it at the beginning of this conversation. It was talking about tax. I think you were talking about taxes. Every penny of taxes that we pay is a penny of liberty, freedom, that we're willing to give up because we believe we get a benefit from having that go to our government for the services that they provide. But we need to make sure that we're getting that value out of that liberty that we are willing to give.
Thank you. That last information you gave us about the banking.
Yes.
That maybe we could work with your office.
We will get you the information so that can be sent out. Yeah.
Right. And Papa, maybe we can disseminate that information. That would be invaluable for our community. Thank you for bringing that up. There are a couple of not minor by any means, but very important topic we would like to talk about. One is education, and particularly college education, and for our children. Essentially, I think if you could allow me to say this, most immigrants, and they're definitely, at least the ones that I know, including myself, they're coming to the United States for a new life. It is such that we get to a point that our children do not have to go through what we went through. And that can only be begotten through education. Immigrants, by higher proportion, believe in education than any other thing. Even if they can't. And what is so amazing is some wide range of immigrants in our community who don't even know how to read and write in English have their children, they will sit with their children to make sure their children do their homework even though they can't help them. And because it's almost like a religion to us. But we need help. And because we're newcomers, we don't even know the system, what opportunities that are available to help us navigate through higher education opportunity for our children. If you could just shed light on that and your thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So education is that key to empowerment. Being here as an immigrant is magnified when that empowerment is shared through the power of education, and that's why I take great we have to take great respect and tremendous work to put into education for all of our communities. A couple things we need to be doing. Number one, please call my office. Don't hesitate to reach out to my office for questions that we can provide on aid, federal aid, Pell Grant opportunities, anything we can. Make sure that's shared, because our office is here to help on the federal aid side too. We need to make sure that federal aid continues to expand and the opportunities to use it expand. Through Pell Grants, we've made them more flexible in how they can be used. We've allowed them to be used for different types of programs and to recognize more kinds of opportunities to use those funding dollars with. If your child goes to high school, I passed legislation that would make greater education funds available for your child to take concurrent or dual enrollment courses, so they could be a junior in high school taking a college course, getting college credit, and it wouldn't cost you anything because it's coming out of our education funds that we've already provided. And so you could have a child that would get one, maybe even more years worth of college done while they're still in high school. And so that's something that we passed, concurrent and dual enrollment programs to expand the funding opportunities for that. I've also worked on legislation to help drive down student loan burdens as well. And I'm going to continue to fight for that, because that education really is empowerment. We need choice in education. Because you may decide that this school is better than that school for whatever reason. Maybe it's because this school focuses on a particular area, or maybe your child has a special opportunity that you want to pursue. So let's make sure that we have that equal choice so that you can provide the best education possible. Because we need to make sure that we're empowering that ability to provide children the best possible education for them. And so we're going to continue to fight for that. Student loans. I'm the third youngest member of the United States Senate, and I still have a student loan. And yeah, I know. And so one of the ideas we have would be to allow a business, an employer, to pay their employees' student loan. And then the employer wouldn't have to pay a tax on it, and the employee wouldn't have to pay an income tax on it. Give them a little bit of new income. So those are a couple of the ideas that we've been sharing on education to make sure that we promote education. Education and immigration really go hand in hand on how we improve our country, how we better lives, and how we continue to build on the promise of America.
Thank you, Senator.
And that's probably a note telling me that I've talked too long. I'm sorry, Bob.
Great. Okay, one final question from me. It is regards to affordable housing. And then from there, we will go from the audience to have the opportunity to address their concern. So, affordable housing truly is a major issue, and particularly in Colorado, because housing cost has really skyrocketed. For some of us, even who bought property many, many years ago, if you look at it today, to how much the cost of housing is, you say, I don't know if I could even afford these things if I was to go out today on the marketplace to do this. And so it's a major concern for our community. And without any, so you're aware of the situation with young immigrants and from all the continents countless immigrants in America. And as a result, we seem to be facing a real crisis in housing and whatnot, and maybe you could give us your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you. Look, housing is such an important part of the cycle of success for everyone. If you lack housing, it's probably an indicator or perhaps responsible for a job that you're not able to hold because of that lack of housing, and it's food insecurity, and it's so all of it is connected. Housing, food security, work opportunities, they really are connected. And so we need to make sure that we're addressing affordable housing in this country. A couple things that we need to do. Number one, I've introduced legislation with my colleagues that would double the affordable housing tax credit. So that would be a huge help to use that doubling of the affordable housing tax credit. Two, opportunity zones that I mentioned. If you take an opportunity zone and you have a housing project in it and you couple it with a couple of other existing tax credits, like a new market tax credit, perhaps there's historical tax credits that are available, plus the benefit of the opportunity zone, the sponsor of that bill, Cory Booker and Tim Scott, have said that could drive down the cost of housing by as much as 30%. So we can use that as a way to drive down the cost of housing. We also need to do a better job of working with our federal partners at HUD and VA to coordinate on making those programs available to more people. I think we've gotten about $50 or $60 million back from HUD to help address affordable housing recently, especially here in Aurora. We just opened up a facility as well on affordable housing. So all of those things can go together, and we need more housing. We need to encourage housing and affordable housing to be built, and I think that's a big key. Those ideas are a big key to driving down the cost of housing.
Thank you. Round of applause for the senator. From here, Papa,
Yes.
do you want to take it over?
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, Senator. Very insightful information. And we wanted to make sure also the audience had the opportunity to ask some questions. So we collected quite a lot, and I know we won't be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to call your name and you will come forward. And if you can just limit it to one question so we can allow the other people to have a chance to do so. So the first question is coming from Ikunda. Ikunda, if you could come forward and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. I work in healthcare, and I've worked for the last 20 years. And we have worked in the hardest, I can say, in history this year. My question or my plea is for the nursing, that if there is anyone who spoke about the grants, and I know we have a lot of student loans, but I don't know how we can help that we have nurses that they still want to go to school, but they still have a baggage of the student loan, so they cannot go to school, because it's like you're adding bricks on top of the bricks that are there, and it's like most of them are, say, a bigger number of it are single moms, so it's like we want to go to school. How can we get help?
Well, thank you. Casey is with my office in the back here. If you could give her a card, I'd love to further this conversation with you. Number one, thank you for your work in healthcare. Thank you for what you all have been doing. You're the heroes throughout this entire pandemic, especially. So talk to Casey, and perhaps there's some programs that exist right now. I know there are some loan forgiveness programs, especially if you work in certain areas that may be underserved, and Colorado has a lot of underserved areas when it comes to healthcare providers. So we can make a connection with that. I've just introduced the legislation that would provide loan forgiveness for people going to mental health training schools and education, and so there may be some existing programs that work. The student loan idea that I just talked to you about would be a great example, because the people that you're working with could be getting assistance from their job, and then they wouldn't have to pay an income tax on it, and they would just use that money to pay off their student loan so that they could do that. So those are a couple of things that would help. But it's hard to get your head above water when you're treading as hard as you can, but you're weighted down. And we need to make sure that people get rid of that weight and can get out of the water and start moving again. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The next question is coming from Dr. Noe. If you could please step forward and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the organizers and Senator Corey. I greatly appreciate for your services for the nation. And I've seen your program and your work in Colorado as well as in the Senate. So I have two questions here, if I may. One of the questions I have is, of course, an African. Well, there is a saying, if you live in Rome, act like Romans, yeah? In the same way, when we immigrants here, we are adapting the system here and work with the system. So, but again, we always also remember our countries, yeah, where we come from, and that's always a concern for us when we come to Africa. What the U.S. policy or what the U.S. do over there has an impact on us as it's impacting our people over there. So you addressed some of the, some of my points there, but my question is on the U.S. investment side. Well, as a businessman myself, I have my own company here in Colorado. In fact, I was one of the first person who introduced or designed a large solar system in the U.S. In fact, the first solar project was installed at the airport, the International Airport. That was my design. One of the work what I contributed in this country was introducing what you call the utility scale solar project, where nobody has an idea at that time how to design and all that. So I was the first one to introduce that system and program, so that others are now copying. What you see now is, is growing there. So as a businessman, I've been an advisor also for a number of countries in Africa, Asia, and also in Caribbean and all that. So one main question here is that as Africa is, my interest, and U.S. investment in Africa is crucial. And as a company owner, we do a number of projects in Africa, and the U.S. Department is what I say, Department of State of, U.S. Department of State's Chamber of Commerce or USTDA and all, other organizations. They are helping U.S. companies, especially on the due diligence and groundwork and all that, which we get free services, which is greatly, thankful on that through the U.S. embassies around the country or around the world. But one of the shortcut I see in the U.S. investment is there is no much, focused investment that can help U.S. companies to break the barriers what is in Africa. And so with this, I'm not saying in any way like OPEC or, Exim Bank and all that are not working, but it's not sufficient to win the bid or to win the business. So Africans are exposed to Chinese, where you get the cheap money from, Asia or from China, and they have no option and they award to the Chinese. So the problem at the moment, what I see after seeing a number of, projects in Africa is most of the projects are in failure because they don't use substandard designs or equipment or materials and all that. So where is U.S. leadership? Which is very important. We want to see U.S. to take, leadership in that to facilitate not only for the U.S. companies, but also how to win Africa to be in the right direction. So this is one of my questions. I don't know, maybe I'll continue the second one or?
So let's take one for now.
All right.
So
Okay.
please, thank you, Doctor.
Well, it's a great question because that question of investment is absolutely critical to the future of U.S.-Africa relationships and our two countries' economic investments together. So we do need a strategy as it relates to encouraging investments from the United States in Africa. I strongly support free trade agreements and bilateral trade agreements, multilateral trade agreements, so we ought to be looking for opportunities like that. We need to be encouraging through OPIC, Adam Bowler, and some of the others who are sort of designating strategies around the globe to invest in different areas. I mentioned my work in Asia. I passed a bill called the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, and one of the things that we did in that bill for Asia was try to create new trade partnerships. And we put money invested into opening up new markets in Asia. We need to do the same thing for Africa. That we can do the same thing to try to provide dollars to build trade capacity between the U.S. and Africa, U.S. businesses and African businesses. And so that would tear down barriers down and help people build contract rule of law systems that can really help. Because we do know what China is doing, and we know that they, as you said, are substandard, and their contract laws are hurting the people of Africa the way they care about it. It's economic mercantilism is what they are doing, and it's unfair. And so we need to make sure that we have that, we fill that void though in investment. Another thing, particularly for your business, have you done any work through the Power Africa policy? Good. So we passed a bill out of the Foreign Relations Committee, signed into law called Power Africa. And the idea was to use U.S. energy companies, solar companies, utility companies to help electrify Africa, creating a more secure grid, more consistent, affordable, abundant, efficient energy systems, electrical systems. Because we know that one of the most important parts of a growing economy is to have stable electricity and abundant, affordable supplies. Obviously, the environmental impact, too, and what that means is important. So, Power Africa has been a huge success in using U.S. technology to invest. The other thing I think is we can connect you with and I don't know if you've done this already, but work with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory that has global partnerships. They're headquartered right here in Golden. And maybe we can get you in touch with NREL as well on some of their investments in Africa.
I used to work there.
You did used to work there?
Yeah.
What's your degree in? What's your degree?
In solar.
In solar, fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much, Doctor. And with the questions I can collected and getting to the Senator's office, I just want to make sure we have time, and we are just getting close to the end. So we'll take two more questions, and we'll bring Abby here that's going to give closing remarks here. So Caleb, have a question. Thank you.
So the Denver International Airport is the largest employer in Colorado, and a large percentage of those workers are actually African and Ethiopian specifically. And I know they face a lot of trouble unionizing and getting healthcare and vision included into their work plans. So I was wondering what you're doing to work to actually improve the benefits that these employees get.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great question. And I've had a number of phone calls, teleconferences, Zoom meetings with DIA concessionaires and business owners and minority-owned businesses at Denver International Airport. We started back, I think, in March or April with our demands to the Treasury Department that they start structuring programs to help businesses, particularly minority-owned businesses and airport concessionaires. And so we've tried to get more dollars sent to the concessionaires, to the businesses at places like Denver International Airport. I mean, let's say you're a restaurant, right, at Terminal C at Denver International Airport. If you're a restaurant in Aurora, it's been tough, it's been a struggle, but you can still hopefully be able to get some business through takeout and delivery, curbside pickup. Well, there is no curbside pickup at Terminal C. You can't do that. So we need to make sure that they have the support. So we've worked on several different ideas. I most recently led an effort to get the Secretary of the Treasury to pass legislation with us, work with us on legislation that would provide new funding specifically targeted for airport concessionaires. And we're going to continue to do that because, especially now through these challenging COVID times, we've got to provide that help because they're different than other businesses, right? They're a captive market. If there's nobody going on the airline, if there's nobody flying in that seat, there's nobody coming into their doors. And so that's what we have to recognize and why they need to have this extra help. So we're fighting for them now. Thank you for, you said you're 17 at Rangeview, is that right?
Yeah.
It's pretty good, huh? That's pretty good.
Thank you, Caleb. Our future is in good hands. I can see that. So the next question is coming from Lucas, please.
Thank you, Senator, for
Thank
being
you.
here. So my name is Lucas. I'm a high school teacher. And I moved here in 2005. I've been teaching since 2006 to today. I've taught in Denver, Cherokee, and Aurora. So my question is specific to education, but in general to like immigrants who are moving to the United States. So most of us come here with higher degrees, or maybe like a bachelor's at a minimum. But when we move to the United States, we are forced to start all over. So my question is, whether you are in education or maybe nursing, is it possible for the state to make it easy so that when people come here, they can just sit for like state boards of education or maybe like nursing or maybe things like that? That will make it easy. And then secondly, about education, there are not many people of color, especially in education. Maybe if I work in Aurora, I can just find maybe like 2 or 3. I don't know if there's any Africans here teaching. So my question is, can the state make it easy for some of us who are maybe like already in the field in order to retain more teachers of color? Maybe provide scholarships or maybe incentives or maybe financial assistance. So maybe if I come with a bachelor's degree, the state can be able to subsidize. So maybe I can be able to get my master's or my PhD. Because sometimes we don't go further in education because the means is not there. Especially in education, there are not many teachers of color. So can there be something that the state can do in order to retain teachers of color so that maybe many more people, because sometimes when you talk about closing the achievement gap, if you look in the rural, and maybe you look at the population, you can find maybe 80% Hispanic, maybe 70% African American, maybe 20% white. But all the students see is white teachers. They don't see teachers of color because they're not there. So is there anything the state can do maybe to subsidize so that they can have more teachers of color, retain them, and maybe provide opportunities for growth?
Yeah, Lucas, 2 great questions. Thank you. And you said you teach at Rangeview, is that right?
That's correct.
And you're Rangeview, so you got a student right here. That's right. Look, this is a great question on how we can have more access. Number one, the federal government, the U.S. government ought to pursue a deep look and investigation into this and understand why that's the case. We will work at Casey. If you grab Casey's card, we will work with that, reach out to the administration, say, hey, we need to find out what's happening. What is the barrier? Why isn't there more diversity? Why don't we have more African teachers because of our community that has African teachers coming here? So we need to make sure that that's right. So, Elizabeth Warren and I passed legislation in the last education bill to make sure that we were understanding what kind of educational imbalances there were between ethnic groups, to make sure that we were reaching every student in every ethnic group and that they were receiving the education that's been promised. Maybe that's the same kind of approach we could have on teachers and accessibility of teachers. And I'll also reach out to Governor Polis and the State Department of Education to find out if there's more that we can be doing together to address the teacher issue and get more people into teaching positions in Colorado, and more African leaders and teachers together. On the reciprocity question, you're exactly right. We need to work on that. So if we could follow up with you on that, I would like to figure out a way that we could have more reciprocity. So if you have that degree and that qualified background, then why can't that just transfer over so that you could be qualified here as well? That's something I'd like to follow up with you on, see if we can solve as well. Another question for the Department of Education here at the state level, because the federal government doesn't license teachers, but the state of Colorado does. And so we'll work with the state of Colorado to see if there can be that licensure transfer and that educational transfer, reciprocity recognized, because that's a really good idea. Thank you. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you, Lucas.
Involved in the logistics business. We provide transportation business for the state of Colorado for a lot of school districts. We see ourselves as an extension of the school district transportation department. We specialize in providing transportation on special needs. My question is not related to that, just giving you a bit of brief information about me. My question is on the Ethiopian Grand Rent System. First of all, we all know the administration position, but I want to know your positions on the Ethiopian ground renaissance done and what you can do to help maybe change the perceptions or the strategy that the current administrations have. And if you agree with the Ethiopian position, this requires a lot of Ethiopian African countries to come together to help build this very important and crucial project for Ethiopians and friends of Ethiopians. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. Thank you. In fact, Deacon Yosef and I were talking about this along with several others in the room. Months ago, I think it was, we had a conversation and we talked about reaching out to the administration, which I did, and talked to them about changing that perception. And we actually, I think it was the day after we met, the administration had made some pronouncements that were unfavorable. And so I had reached out to them and objected to some of the positions that they had taken. I've talked to Senator Ben. Thank you. Talked to Senator Carter about this, and I believe the resolution that Congresswoman Bass that we've talked about earlier includes language in it relating to the dam as well. So, I'm going to continue to reach out to the administration on this and continue to work with the Ethiopia on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, PT. So, Abi will come and give us closing remarks, and when we're done, we will have time to take pictures, and people can hear on the stage, and you can exchange business card with the center. Let's always be mindful to keep our face mask on and just practice the health requirements. Thank you. Let's welcome Abi, one of the fierce lady leaders we have in the community. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause for Senator Gardner. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you also to the Ethiopian American Civil Council and the African Leadership Group for putting this event together. And let's also give a round of applause to our sponsors, Qual Image, Lucy Coffee, and Jumbo Motors. Thank you first and foremost to the community members who joined us today. Some of you guys here, those who are joining us online, thank you so much for giving your voice today. I'm not sure if you guys all know this, there's an election coming up. And the Aurora that I know, that I've grown up in, it's diverse. It's full of different languages, different flavors, and a very rich international culture. My best friends growing up are Nigerian, and my church was made of Ethiopian and Eritreans. The city of Aurora is marked by this international community. It's the most diverse schools, the most African-owned businesses and restaurants. And my vision for 2020, which I believe you all share, is that our political landscape would also be marked by our African voice. There are many barriers when it comes to being engaged in politics as Africans and Americans. Of course, the ballots are written in English, and often the language is complex. Many of us work long hours, and on November 4th, we might find ourselves rushing to the ballot station and perhaps wondering where we placed our mail-in ballot and if it's too late to send that in. Some barriers are even a little more complicated than that. When I started getting engaged in politics in college, my mom told me one thing very clearly. Don't post your political opinions on Facebook. And I wonder if some of you guys in this room understand that fear. It's not about, she doesn't want me wasting, time on Facebook or fighting with people in the comments, but there's a legitimate fear that comes with being bold, coming from where we came from, being bold and having a voice, and being concerned about politics. We have a fear there. For some of you, it's more than that. We have potentially heard that politics is for people who are older. Politics is maybe for men. Some of us have heard that politics, that voting, is for those that are smarter or well prepared or work in government. Well, I'm here to tell you today, as we know, that politics is for us all too. If you are concerned about your kids getting an amazing education, politics is for you, and voting is for you. If you're concerned with the safety of your students as they play in the park, politics is for you, and voting is for you. If you're concerned with the quality of schools and roads, with who represents you, and what are the policies and the accountability that the police in your community get. Politics is for you. It's for all of us. And so as I leave you guys today, I want to go to iwillvote.com. IWILL vote.com. This site can tell you about if you're registered or not, where your polling stations are, if you potentially moved in the past. This site can tell you about if you're registered or not, where your polling stations are, if you potentially moved in the past year and need to update your information, if you've changed your name. iwillvote.com is the easiest way to update your registration and make sure that you're eligible to vote in the coming election. Second is the U.S. Census. So the census comes every 10 years. Every decade, the U.S. does a count of who is our community, who are we made up of. And this is, you don't have to be a citizen to be counted in the census. So at let me get this website correct. 2020census.gov. You can be counted and make sure your family and your household is counted. And last but not least, we've identified the barriers that contribute to many African communities not voting in U.S. elections. But I want to submit to you guys that one solution to these many barriers is that we stand together as a community. Yes, it can be challenging. We may have different areas of expertise, and on your own, I'm not capable or I can't do it, but as a community, we can do it. As a community, we have experts in medicine, we have experts in business, we have experts in STEM. As a community, we are more than we are alone. And so I want to encourage you guys, the resources that you've learned here today, this afternoon, and also online at iwillvote.com and the Census 2020, share that with your neighbors, share it with your colleagues, share it with your family members. Be sure to think about what's on the ballot and see if you can have those discussions in your family. We've heard a lot of what Senator Corey Gardner has to say, and let's look online and see what Hickenlooper also has to say. Let's challenge ourselves to be prepared for this election. We can do it together. So thank you guys for having me, and I want to invite you, before we go, to join us again Monday for the Congress Candidate Forum in the same place, 5 to 7:30 p.m. on Zoom and on Facebook. And I will leave you with this again. It might be challenging alone, but together we can. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Abi. And our program will resume, and we have time for picture, and then we'll be Senator. Thank you so much. It was truly an honor. Deacon Youssef, thank you so much. We are blessed to have you in the community, and we appreciate your wisdom. Thank you so much.
So I think they'll do pictures up here.
You guys want to take pictures here with the senator?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do it on the stage.
On the stage.